Great stuff. For those who don't know you, Alex, do you want to maybe just introduce yourself and the institution that you work for?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Is the sound okay in this
It's
microphone? This
great,
second?
thank you.
Great. Excellent. Yes, I'm Alex Smith. I'm an assistant director of international admissions at Michigan State University, which David already mentioned is in East Lansing, Michigan. Large institution with just over 50,000 students and about 7,000 international students. So huge international population on campus. And it's my pleasure to work with students from the UK as well as the United Arab Emirates, Africa, and as well as international students attending US high schools, and new for this past year was Australia and New Zealand as well.
Great stuff. And a growing number of kids coming from the UK are off to be Spartans, so we're very happy about that.
Absolutely, yes. That's been definitely a bright light this year.
Great stuff. So I've got a couple of questions that I've got and people have sent through before. I'll say to the people listening as well, please, if you've got a comment, type it in the comment section and I'll ask Alex those. One interesting development and something for you guys that I think at Michigan State will be interesting for you to see is that in the light of COVID-19, more and more colleges are going to stop asking for SAT or ACT, either for 1 year or for a couple of years or indeed forever. That's something you guys have done for a number of years at MSU. How does test optional admissions work differently? And for maybe people on the call who've never heard of this idea of applying to the US without an SAT or an ACT, what do they need to know?
So yes, students, especially in certain markets where there's more familiarity with the SAT and ACT, they're surprised to hear that we don't require it. And for us, especially for students from the UK, the mentality with those tests internationally for us, in my time here, which is 6 years, it's been verifying that students are proficient in English, which we assume isn't an issue in the UK, so we don't require it for students applying from there. But it's great to see more institutions going test optional, especially with some of the difficulties around testing right now. But for us, that's been our policy as long as I've been here at the university. But I would just say the way that I review an application personally, I'm looking more at your day-to-day work, what you've done outside of a test like the ACT or SAT. I know that the UK system is heavily exam-based with the A levels and everything, but I'm looking at that in conjunction with everything else on your application. So as many students and counselors and folks know, the application is it's quite a bit different, and so we've got a lot more to go off of beyond just numbers like the SAT and ACT, for example. So I don't have too much anxiety about that change. In fact, I'm pretty happy about it, and I hope that more universities will start being flexible, especially as students run into these difficulties. And for me, it's been great to hear the relief from students when they ask, how am I going to be able to successfully apply without these? And I'm just happy to remind them that it's an optional piece for us. So
great.
I will add one little quick thing though. For students interested in the Honors College and some of the more prestigious programs on campus, it could be really helpful, but it's certainly not required. For example, I had a student just last week who had excellent A-level results in the Honors College, maybe didn't see them right off the bat because they didn't have an SAT or ACT, but I helped get that on their radar by virtue of the A-levels.
Oh, great. Well, that's good to know. I mean, certainly when you say about testing, certainly we've been thinking about just waking up every morning and more colleges are dropping the requirement, understandably so. At the University of California, which I don't think many people saw coming last week, deciding they won't need it for the cycle. I'm reminded of the famous quote from Churchill after battles in North Africa in World War II, that we're not at the end, we're not even at the beginning of the end, but we're at the end of the beginning. And I think we're in this point where we stop talking about test optional. That stops being the unusual thing. Test required might become the unusual thing as we go forward. So great. So in terms of the other stuff that's changing right now with things like deposit dates, reply dates, visas, all that kind of stuff, for any students who are holding offers now in the US have maybe got till May 1st, June 1st to decide where they go, what kind of advice could you give to them, to their advisors, about what should they be thinking of now with the hope of coming onto campus in the US in August?
Well, first things first, we are still planning as if August is the reality right now for normal operations to resume. In fact, the plan is at this moment, the second half of our summer term would be back to normal campus operations, if you will. So my gut is to tell students to stay the course and to plan as if things will be in order for their arrival in August. That being said, we are preparing for any issues with travel and visas, like you alluded to. We are constantly monitoring those pieces. As I mentioned, some of the territories I work with, there's a pretty wide variety of visa wait times and things like that. So the name of the game right now for us is just being flexible and reassuring students that we will work with you. I know there's a ton of anxiety. I've worked with several students who are currently in the UK, but are maybe citizens of another country where they have family, or they might plan to go to their consulate in their native country to go through the visa process. And so all of that requires us especially to be flexible. And fortunately, especially my colleagues in the Big Ten Conference, which includes large public institutions such as Ohio State, University of Michigan, Penn State, Maryland, it sounds like that's been a pretty common thread between all of us, is flexibility and a desire to make this as easy on students and their families as possible, whether that means delaying their start until the spring semester if needs be, or helping students enroll in some online classes first and then getting them here in the spring if there are any delays. Right now, that's not the reality we're looking at, but we are preparing for it, we're discussing it, and we want students to know that no matter what happens with that, we would be, speaking for Michigan State specifically, we would be willing to change the start term, help students with any of the issues around starting in January versus August, and just working with them to make it a smooth transition, regardless of the context of where they're coming from. So we talk about this almost every day right now. We have meetings with our international team, with our larger admissions team, with our whole enrollment management group, which includes the office that helps students get into classes. It includes all the scholarship teams. So scholarship offers would be carried over if it comes to the point where students will need to arrive in January instead of August. But right now, that's just contingency plan. That's not the reality we believe we're going to face.
Okay, sounds good. So I guess the advice for students or counselors would be, don't sit there wondering, get in touch with, if it's Michigan State, with whoever the admissions counselor would be, or whatever college in the US it's going to be. Ask them these questions, find out the answers, and I guess everyone will be as accommodating as they possibly can be to get students on campus.
Agreed, yeah. So we know that there are a lot of individual situations, and there's no one-size-fits-all policy for this right now. I would just say with the May 1st, June 1st piece, students do have to request an extension to June 1st. So for Michigan State, and probably for a lot of other institutions that have a similar policy, you go into your student account and there's just a little form that you fill in your name and your request to be extended to June 1st. It's a one line and click and submit, and then it's official. So it's easy.
Good to know, because now probably say for those on the call who might not know the nuance of that, saying that typically the date by which you have to have paid a deposit to secure a place at US College would be May 1st. Because of the current situation, other colleges have extended that to June 1st, partly to be helpful, but partly because, and Michigan State's a good example, a lot of students want to be able to go on campus, go to admitted students day, see what they're going, see how they're going to be treated before they make that final decision, and that's quite tough right now.
Yes.
Yeah. One last question, Alex, on for the class of 2022 kids, the incoming students. For students in British pattern systems, so A-levels aren't happening, IB students aren't happening, there's an issue there. For students in places like in Ireland, where they said that the Leaving Cert is still going to happen, but it might be postponed, what advice can you give to people whose whole school leaving exam thing has been messed up, about what they should do with coming to college in the States?
That is a huge piece of this, and as we've heard from more testing agencies and organizations that these things have been delayed or canceled or modified. We've taken this to the highest level of our university. So similarly to answer the last question, we're going to be flexible. We are, technically, Michigan State does not require A-levels. They're a huge help in the admissions process, but So students do technically have the credentials that they need to be considered high school graduates in the United States with the GCSEs. So that is okay, and they'll be able to progress through the process and not have any issues on our end. But it is helpful for students to notify us of that, and for us to be able to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure that, for example, at the end of a first year on campus, we make sure that we have all the documentation from a student's high school. So proving that they've completed high school and everything like that. So there'll be some additional hiccups on our end this year, just verifying that for students who, perhaps did have their final exams canceled or didn't have the full diploma, for example, from IB, just working through issues like that. But flexibility is going to be key, and that these are issues that we're facing not just with our international students, but a lot of U.S. citizens abroad too. So this is touching everybody. So
great. And I guess if a student, Ireland might be a good example where they can get to campus in August, but they want to get back to finish out their leaving cert with exams maybe in September, October. You'll be similarly flexible with giving them a leave to go and do it. And
yes, yeah, we would work with that too. And we've got faculty on board with this. That's, I think, the overarching theme of the past month has been, let's make sure that we take care of our current students and their questions and concerns and get all of that sorted. But as soon as we get that, and while we've got one foot in that first door, we need to really start working on what's coming. So, we had a pretty smooth transition with that, and I've been getting a lot more answers this week on questions like this, but it's changing on a day-by-day basis. So just stay posted.
Great. And you mentioned that I would be interested in finding out. You said Michigan State is obviously a huge beast of a university, as are all of the Big Ten. And you mentioned your rivals down the road there, who I wasn't going to bring up.
Yeah, that's right.
What's the situation for students then on campus, and particularly international students? I guess you guys had to get into action pretty quickly.
We did, and I've been in touch with quite a few students who are still here because our housing office was determined not to put anybody in a terrible situation where perhaps they couldn't get home and they had nowhere to stay. So we did keep our residence halls open, and international students, as well as students here in the U.S., were able to stay. We have hundreds of students from California, Texas, Florida, all over the United States. So not all of them were able to get home easily at this time either. So we have hundreds of students still on campus. We have all the basic needs covered still. We have food, we have all the folks like myself, and my wife is actually an international student advisor, so she helps with visas and things like that for students on campus. So all of us are still working. We're still serving our students. Some folks are working from home like myself, and then other staff members are going to campus a few times a week. So we're in touch with students. We've got, I think, excellent communication happening right now, considering the sheer number of people we're talking about.
Yeah.
But, it was pretty remarkable to see how quickly these decisions were made, how quickly changes happened, especially, the students that are still here on campus. They're still taking classes, but they've all moved online for the remainder of the semester. So that was a massive undertaking too. And, we're just trying to make sure that our faculty are able to deliver a great class still, and that our students are safe and healthy. And I'm really proud of the work that our housing office has done. Especially want to give a shout out to them, our communications teams, who have made sure that students know how to get a hold of us and get a hold of us quickly if they're having any issues. And I'd say, we're nearing the end of the 4th week at home right now for myself, and things have gone as smoothly as they possibly could have, considering the situation.
Good to know. And again, another one of the advantages of scale of being a big university. When I'm talking to students about the different type of institution of it, and I'm in the middle of this now with the junior class, the students for the class of 2021, of like, what type of university you want. One of the advantages of a big university is there are a lot of people doing different stuff, be that offering a lot of classes, a lot of clubs, different residence opportunities, but the scale to very quickly pivot to online learning, I guess, is another advantage we'd never really thought of.
Yes, yeah, and having that technology available already, and having faculty who are willing and able to do that was a big lift at first, but I know the students that are still here are still really engaged with that, and are still quite busy.
Yeah, I can imagine. And yeah, we mentioned it a couple of times about Michigan State being a public university. Something I think that might get missed out. Public versus private is a kind of interesting distinction. I guess you've got a lot of students who come to Michigan State because they're from the state, they're from the local area, for whatever reason, possibly socioeconomic reasons. Michigan State is where they're going to go. I guess keeping housing open and support services for those students is essential, because you'll have students who don't have easy access to internet at home, whose housing situation might be a little tenuous, whose access to meals might be complicated. So I guess there's a pretty decent community on campus still, both of international kids and domestic kids.
Yes, and I think the number of students here in the U.S. has definitely gone down. It's primarily international students that are still here,
Right.
but travel in the United States, it's still possible, but it's a matter of whether students wanted to take the risk right now, or if they felt safer for themselves and their families staying here. So you can't paint with too broad of a brush, but it's definitely primarily international students who are still on campus. And what happened was, just to give you the details here, we did a survey to figure out where students were, who was staying, so we could figure out which dining halls to leave open, for example, and which staff were still essential. So that was how that was handled. And I think, once again, I can't imagine that undertaking for our housing office, but they jumped in, I think, no more than 10 days. They had that figured out. They had it figured out, for international students who did make their way home, refunding them for the remainder of their housing costs, for example. That was a consideration we wanted to make sure that it got taken care of too. And I think that for me, I was really impressed. For example, the fitness centers on campus refunded us for the remainder of what we'd already paid without asking. So I think the university's handling this really well, and I hope that's the case at other institutions too. And I feel like there's no playbook for a global pandemic, especially running a university, but Michigan State's president, just so you know, is actually a medical doctor who's an expert in infectious diseases. So we've got a lot of faith in our leadership right now. Yes. And I think a lot of other institutions are keeping an eye on what we're doing. So that's been very comforting during all of this.
Great. It reminds me of the story that came last week that the Taoiseach in Ireland, the Prime Minister, who his career was a general practitioner, he's a family doctor. So probably slightly different from some other political leaders whose level of science might be different. So great. Absolutely. A question which may be slightly esoteric, but potentially I think is an issue. A lot of students might look at a school like Michigan State because they're interested in athletics, either to play themselves or they just want to experience that big time, go to the stadium, go to the basketball game, all the kind of razzmatazz that comes with that level of athletics. The spring seasons have been cancelled. My social media is not going to be filled with people's brackets for March Madness, despite the fact I don't really know what that's all about. But those athletes are going to be allowed to stay on for another year and so. I guess for kids who are looking for athletics and stuff, they again need to be talking to the coaches, talking to the athletic recruiters, just to find out, because if the senior class can be able to be eligible for another year, it's going to be slightly different in terms of what's going to be coming in then, I guess.
I haven't heard all of the implications of that. I'm actually one of our athletics liaisons, so I do work with a lot of the coaches, especially for some of the Olympic sports, and specifically for international students. And I've had some questions pop up with this, and I think a lot of the coaches are kind of in a holding pattern right now, waiting to hear from the NCAA about how that's going to be handled. If there'll be just one season worth of eligibility, or a semester, or how that's going to work. There's a lot of unanswered questions with that, but as you said, keeping in touch with the coach. If there's ways that we can help facilitate that, I know, speaking personally, I'd be happy to try as one of our liaisons with athletics, but haven't got solid answers on that. But that's something we'll be keeping an eye on, and hopefully we'll have an answer to this summer.
Yeah, I guess because of there was tight regulations and coaches communicating with prospects, going through someone like you is probably an easier way of finding these answers because I don't think any coach, particularly a Big Ten school right now, wants to be falling foul of the NCAA for trying to help, but inadvertently get themselves into trouble.
Definitely not. I think there's a lot of horror stories out there about um, you know issues thrown out by the NCAA, with coaches and what's permissible and what's not. So yes, if there's ways that we can help facilitate that through admissions, I'm happy to try to help.
Great stuff. Awesome. Right. And then just to pivot on for younger students, for those who are, who've got into the mix now, they're thinking about doing some testing, they're looking at their college lists, kids who want to come to college in August 2021, what advice would you give to them now?
It's definitely stressful thinking about, when are things going to be getting back to normal? Am I going to be able to, take all, the exams I was planning to take, all of that? My best advice would just be to breathe and to communicate with us and acknowledge that, we understand what you're going through and we are thinking about this. We're pivoting, to the next class right now. And we know there's a ton of anxiety. We are already speaking with students and families who have questions about everything from testing to, if they're going to be able to be on campus and if we're going to be back to normal operations. So I would just say, plan as if things are going to be back to normal right now, but realize that we're going to continue to be flexible with students. We're going to be sharing information as much as possible and keeping students informed. And, we're going to work with you basically. So I wouldn't say don't get too hung up. Don't be too anxious. Communicate with us and we will do our best to communicate with you too. But carry on and plan as if things will be back to normal, hopefully as well.
And if the testing, as we said at the start, if the testing becomes difficult, then there are awesome schools like MSU that were already happy to take you without any testing, and an increasing number of schools are seeing the light and doing the same. So that shouldn't be a barrier to entry.
Yes, yeah, I think it's not an easy time to be going through something like this, but I don't know if there's ever been a time where higher education professionals are going to be more sympathetic and understanding as you're working through these kinds of things.
Yeah, well, I've been using the analogy a few times when talking to some of my families of junior classmen. We sometimes talk about the idea that we're building the plane whilst we're flying it. And my impression now is that you guys on the admissions end are sitting there building the cockpit. I'm sitting in the back trying to hold the fuselage together as a counselor, and then the kids are sitting in the back of the plane thinking, where the hell are we going?
Right.
But we're all in it together. Admissions and counselors and families, we're all trying to make this work, and we will emerge on the other side with a bunch of students enrolled for at some point to graduate college in 2024 and then from 2025 onwards.
Well said. And we can't wait to get back out there and see you all in person. As I was supposed to be in the UK last month, and I was very bummed that got postponed, but I'll be so excited when we're able to start solidifying plans for the next trips out. And
well, you're on my list to sit in a minivan with Country Roads on the radio, coming around the East Midlands in September. There's a warm pint of English ale waiting for you at some point, Alex, as well, whenever we can make that happen. Great. So just to finish off then, if people want to learn more about Michigan State, they want to get hold of you guys, where do you guys exist online and social media? Where can people get in touch?
So we are on Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat. The website is admissions.msu.edu if you want admission-specific information. And then my email address, which I'm always happy to share with students, especially in the UK, is SMIT, as in the first four letters of my last name, 1145 @msu.edu.
There we go. Awesome. And then anything with kind of Spartans in the title, you're going to find the Michigan State on any Facebook, Instagram, anything like that.
True.
Really, very, very strong social media presence. So great stuff. Cool. Alex, anything else I've forgotten to ask? Anything else you think should be your contributor to the discussion?
No, I think I've emphasized just know that we're here for you, and that's my big takeaway from this is communicate with us. I'm working with students from all over the world with questions, and we're going to take this case by case and be there for you all.
Great stuff. It's really nice to finish on that. Thank you so much for giving up your time.
My pleasure.
Great stuff. I hope that's useful for everyone. This will be saved. People look at it earlier. I'll be back same time next week. My guest, who's actually just joined to see what we're doing, it will be Ann Kuijs from Tilburg University in the Netherlands, going through the same kind of questions. What's the situation for students going in 2020? For students in younger years, what should they be doing, and try and give some reassurance. So once again, thanks, Alex. Look forward to seeing you in person soon. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for Instagram Live.
You too, David. Thank you.